from Israel. It's the John's Place live show. Tonight with us in the studio once again, Mr. Paul Wiener, co-chair of the Likud Anglo Division. Paul, welcome our audience tonight.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Tonight, the results and the repercussions and the situations and the commentary on the meeting between President Donald Trump and the leader of North Korea, Mr. Kim. Now, many of you who are of the age that can remember a very historical day in the Middle East in the history of Israel, November 11th, 1977. That is the date that President of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, arrived in Israel to an unbelievable welcome from the leader of the most populist, strongest and powerful military nation in the Arab world, Egypt, coming to Israel with reaching out his long stretched arm in order to forge a peace agreement with Menachem Begin and the Israeli people. Now, that was an historical event, but it's very confusing to me why so many in the mainstream media have put down the efforts of Mr. Donald Trump to do something that no other American president has been able to accomplish, which is having a meeting with any of the leaders of North Korea. He went over there with hopes of having a dialogue with an arch enemy that has threatened to destroy the United States, whether it's the west coast of the United States from California, going as far eastward as New York. Never, ever any open dialogue in a positive way, till Mr. Donald Trump reached out his hand and said, "Let's talk." Now, for the mainstream media, this was obviously an upsetting moment. Once again, Donald Trump has been able to upstage the previous president of the United States, Mr. Barack Hussein Obama, who basically wasn't able to accomplish anything. Though he was able to receive the Peace Prize in 2009 after his tour around the Arab world, saying how sorry we were, and his apologies around the world, saying how America tried too hard to influence their countries. Donald Trump, in his short time in office, has been able to affect the Middle East in a way that no other leader of the free world has been able to do in our present and modern times. For example, Donald Trump promised to move the embassy during his campaign. Most other presidential candidates, both from the left and the right, have always promised that if elected, they would move the embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Only President Donald Trump fulfilled his promise and moved the embassy to Jerusalem a lot quicker than anyone believed, even after the initial announcement that the embassy would be moving. And there were critics who said it could take 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. But Donald Trump moved it within 5 to 6 months of the announcement. Once again, these same critics are screaming out how Donald Trump has accomplished nothing. Mr. Charles Schumer, our friendly senator from New York, said Donald Trump gave away everything. He met with Kim, he said he'd cancel military operations, and he got nothing. You would think the Democrats, being the liberals that they are, would love to have seen that Donald Trump moved away from an aggressive standpoint towards North Korea onto a path of trying to negotiate a peace treaty. Paul, what happened there? Where have the left wing of the Democratic Party, which is almost the whole party today, where have they lost their ability to see what is good about certain political movement, and what is something that hurts them because it's done by Mr. Donald Trump?
They're only concerned about getting reelected, and to support Donald Trump in anything that he does good, especially, let's say this, which would be a normal, get together. That, midterms are coming up. I mean, you hear Nancy Pelosi, the unemployment is at all-time high, growth rate is at all-time high, and she's saying how bad it is for the country. I mean, they're just, these liberal left lunatics are lunatics. They had power, they had a taste of power, and here we are almost a year and a half into the presidency, and they can't take it, and they think that they're somehow still in control, but they're slowly finding out that they're going to go by the wayside.
How is it that the previous administration, including Mr. John Kerry, the Secretary of State, was pushing so hard for an Iranian deal, any kind of deal that was not an agreement and a treaty between two nations, because it was never confirmed by the Congress of the United States, yet a few short days after the signing, President Obama had no problem airlifting $152 billion in cash on pallets to the Iranian regime, which all of a sudden gave a new lease on life to Hamas, which was suffering a great deal of isolation with no means of financing their terrorist groups. But the deal with Iran gave a new opening to Hamas, to Hezbollah.
And Hezbollah.
Correct.
And
in Yemen.
Not just that, the Iranians have been trying to build bases in Syria, which Israel continues to blow up. Which is
what did the previous President Obama do in Syria when he mentioned his red lines? That if Assad uses chemical warfare against his citizens, we will not tolerate it. We will attack. We will respond. Well, ladies and gentlemen, anybody who has any recollection of history knows that Mr. Barack Obama was probably bowling with his children or out to a great dinner in Chicago with his wife while this was going on.
He was playing golf.
John. He was playing golf.
Playing golf.
He did nothing to protect the American people. He did nothing to protect, and he used to say all the time, Israel, we have your back. I have your back. You have nothing to be afraid of. That is a terrorist attack, a knife terrorist attack in your back.
Yes.
That Israel had nothing to worry about. What did Obama do? He gave Iran the key to spending billions of dollars reigniting the terrorist organizations around the Middle East. What further did Mr. Obama do in his times? Okay? Before the Iranian deal, he never bombed Syria, we discussed, over the red lines with Syria bombing and gassing its citizens, not to make
and also they just found out all this money was being supposed to be funneled into the
Iranian people.
No, actually, the ones that are fighting Assad, actually a good amount of that money went to ISIS. Because they didn't know where they were sending the stuff to.
So let's
or
look
maybe
at,
they did and they just overlooked it.
So let's look at the two sides. I want to understand why so many groups around the world are telling Israel, don't be enamored with President Trump. A lot of those groups, unfortunately, I'd have to say, are Jewish groups, including the American Jewish Congress that just had that convention in Israel.
They're generally a very sympathetic.
Very left. Very left.
They used to be very sympathetic to Israel. But now...
Well, it's not in vogue in America as a liberal group to be very supportive of Israel because they are run by such a fanatic.
What they don't understand is that they're safe in America because we have a strong Israel here. When there was no Israel, nobody was safe in the world. And Hitler and the Germans and the Nazis proved that.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we must understand the dynamics that we are facing. We are very lucky, the people of Israel, at this time to have our most favorable president sitting in the Oval Office since the independence of the State of Israel, okay? We as Jewish people must also understand that condemning a person because of his personality flaws instead of looking at his achievements is a very poor way to look at politics, especially dealing with life and death situations. Now, we know Donald Trump has been in our corner. What this brings me to is a somewhat of a concern. Now that we see the negotiating prowess of Mr. Donald Trump, a man who does not back down to anybody, a man who goes into negotiations willing to walk away if the deal is not sweet, unlike Obama and Kerry, who would do anything and did everything to woo the Iranians into signing a deal. We must look now into the future when the Middle East peace plan that is being set forth by Mr. Jason Greenblatt and Mr. Jared Kushner, both very prominent members of the political world, very knowledgeable in Middle East politics, but they're going to come forward with the deal. The deal that Donald Trump said is the deal of all deals. I just hope he stands his ground and being practical of who the parties that are negotiating.
Well, he doesn't really have anybody to negotiate with the Palestinians. I mean, they're still flying their kite bombs into Israel. Today, there was in East Jerusalem, somebody blew himself up with making a bomb in East Jerusalem.
Freedom fighters, aren't they freedom fighters?
Hey,
Gaza, these are peaceful demonstrators.
Riots. No, there's riots in Ramallah against the PA because of what they're going on in Gaza. You know, there's nobody really to represent the Palestinian people, just a bunch of terrorists, and they don't represent the people.
What happened to the Palestinians representing the Palestinian people, whoever they are?
Well, you know, if there's anybody, you know, who speaks, you know, favorably to do something, you know, they're murdered by their own people. So it's difficult for them.
So what is everyone pushing here? What is the two-state solution?
There is no two-state solution. Get over the two-state solution.
So what is America hanging out there that they have
the only
positive peace plan?
The only foreseeable two-state solution I can see is the state of Israel and the Jewish state of Samaria and Judea.
We need two Jewish states?
Well, that's the only one I would see as, you know, achievable.
Oh, let us just.
It would solve a lot of problems.
Let us just achieve a one state with all our boundaries, our biblical land, our Jewish people living in freedom. Just recently, a whole town of Jewish people lost their homes. They were evicted from their homes. This happens quite often in Jewish areas.
Thanks to what they call peace now. What is peaceful about taking people from their homes?
Well, their job is to cause as much pain and suffering to Jewish people. Their job and all these other left-wing NGOs, non-government organizations, their jobs is to flood the Israeli judicial system with crazy lawsuits just to make a living hell for those living in Yehuda and Shomron, for the politicians who support it, for the lawyers and judges that support it. That is their job. It's not an ideological issue for them.
No, but the biggest problem is the Supreme Court and are mostly left-wing, you know, merits people, and they have an overreach on anything in the country. You do not have that kind of Supreme Court which has overreach anywhere in the world except for here. And why they got it was...
This is a little bit off topic. First, I'd like to say hello to all our listeners.
Yes.
Mr. Jay Jaffe in Queens, hi, how are you? Good to see you. Mr. Larry Dominich, long-term friend from Boca Raton. Nice to hear from you. The folks at John's Place in Boca Raton, I hope you're having a good lunch. Nice to hear you. Who's that? Allie.
And the caller, Liz.
Oh, and the new caller, Liz Pearl, Lizbeth. Thank you all for listening. We look for your feedback. We had a lot of nice feedback on our last show.
We have a lot of nice, good friends from Israel and elsewhere around the world too, I must say.
We always want to inform, okay? We want you to understand. Dig behind the headlines. Most of the headlines you will read are just that, headlines. It's not the real story.
They're fake
Mhm.
lines.
Fake lines, as Paul, ladies, Paul, I like that, fake lines.
Definitely.
Anyway, we don't make things up. We speak from the heart. Paul here is an expert. He's qualified to be a professor in political science in the Middle East. He doesn't go after that title, but he's qualified. I just listen to him and learn a lot from him, and I learn a lot from the people around me because we know the truth. Don't fall for the fake media.
And also, don't forget to ask your questions. The more questions we get, the more input we get, the more we can talk about the things that you're interested in too.
By the way, if you're going to be in the Boca Raton area in the next several weeks, we may be looking for a secret guest host.
At John's place.
At John's place, live at John's place.
It's a real place.
If you would like to have a chance to join us in the audience or possibly to be a guest co-host, please private messenger us.
Or
leave
just
us
to
a
get some
message.
good Italian food and say hello to John.
Yes. Signing off from Israel. Shalom and have a great night and a Shabbat Shalom and a Chodesh Tov. Go ahead, Paul.
Good night, everybody. And also, I just became a grandfather again.
Simon Tov,
Yesterday.
Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, and Simon Tov. Mazel Tov to the Chatan and the Kala. Lots of happy days. We should only share many smachot, happy occasions together. Shalom ulahitraot. We'll get that one day.
Press end.